Welcome back to Big Riff Energy, episode 7. It is Monday, March 20th. If you notice the title of this episode, A Cruel and Shallow Money Trench, you might be aware of the topic of discussion today, the music biz. Don't worry, I'm not going to bore the shit out of you or me with specifics. This is going to be, if I can get what's in my brain out of my mouth, this might be the most unhinged, wild, tangential, exciting episode so far. Now, Cruel and Shallow Money Trench comes from the infamous Hunter S. Thompson quote, which I'll read. It's up on the screen here too. The music business is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men die like dogs. There's also a negative side. It's a great quote. I saw in the last couple of days researching it that it looks like he was probably actually talking about the television industry and that this has been embellished a little bit, but it still stands. I love that quote. Obviously, the most cynical possible view of the industry, but in certain ways, not that far off. What's cool about this podcast for me so far is I'll have these ideas knocking around in my brain, lots of them, always. And it's like, do these connect? Does this make any sense? There's just chaos going on up here at all times. And I'll sort of find a connecting thread between things I've been pondering and maybe frustrated over lately. And then one of you guys will send me an email and it sort of connects the dots. So it's that cool human connection that I keep talking about. So Matt sent an email. Nate, loving the podcast so far. Some recent music biz items that I would be interested in your opinion on. He talks about Metallica buying a record pressing plant. I think that's awesome. There was a good friend of mine who I grew up playing music with. He went on to get involved in the business world, but he's always tried to stay in music somehow. And we were having a discussion probably 2019, and he said, if I were to invest in some aspect of the music business or music industry, what would you suggest? And I told him, if you could buy a record pressing plant, you're basically going to be able to print money. Merch is the other obvious one, t-shirts and stuff like that. Records were in high demand at the time, and it's even crazier now. I know a lot of you are frustrated by how long it's taking physical albums to come out. It's supply and demand, man. It was rough before the pandemic, which is good. It means people are buying records. But once the pandemic hit, and with supply chain issues and even the situation in Ukraine affected supplies, certain plastics and stuff like that used in the manufacturing of vinyl, it's been crazy. I know that Sony had to open a pressing plant in Japan that had been closed for decades because the demand for vinyl is higher than it's been since like the 70s, I believe. Metallica are still the good guys, which is crazy. They're the biggest metal band in the world, and they're still the good guys. They have always made an effort to stay clued in to cool newer bands. I mentioned that on a previous episode. They take good newer bands on tour. I know firsthand that James listens to an independent metal station in Colorado and is calling in and like requesting stuff. Lars stays real clued in, all of them. So they're still the good guys. So I think it's awesome that they own a record pressing plant. I think some cool stuff could happen from that. Bottom line, they've earned it. They've been locked into a major label deal their whole lives, basically. They're finally out of it. They have their own label. They own all their stuff. And in the ultimate boss move that only a band like Metallica could pull off, they own their own record pressing plant. And they deserve it. They deserve it. There's a very specific arc that super successful bands go through. And it involves grinding it out, getting a deal, getting out of the deal, starting their own label, and going from there. And I'll get into that later when when I talk more about the music industry by and large. But yeah, hopefully someday Metallica can help out all these cool bands that are having to wait like a year for their record to come out. You know, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And bottom line, they deserve it. Metallica rules. They're the good guys. Now, the other topic that Matt brought to my attention is something about Spotify. You can guess whether this is, you know, a good or evil thing that Spotify is doing. Something about how they are offering some sort of thing where they give your songs more exposure, but if you use that feature of Spotify as an artist, that it doesn't pay as high a royalty rate as if you don't use it. And man, I don't really care, honestly, about the specifics of this. If you're starting a band and seriously pursuing music as a career, thinking that you're going to make a living off of streaming royalties and revenue and stuff like that, don't do it. Don't do it, because it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And I'm going to talk about the industry in very general, almost sort of metaphysical terms. I will say, if you want to hear someone talk about it a little more specifically and like with concrete data and stuff like that, go listen to Billy Corgan talk to Joe Rogan about it. It's a 20-minute video. It's on YouTube. He does a really good job of breaking down sort of the inherent toxicity and predatory aspects of the music industry, which is a constantly evolving beast that is in a death rattle and has been for a long time, but just won't die. So the way that I've begun to look at this is there's a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum is materialistic living. On the other end of the spectrum is spiritualistic. If that term makes you bristle, if you're like a hardcore atheist or whatever, let's call it the ethereal or whatever, that which cannot be scientifically measured. That end of the spectrum is where art and human expression comes from. When we're writing a song, when we're painting something, even when a dude like Steve Jobs is coming up with the iPhone, we're pulling something out of a dimension which did not previously exist. We are communing with something beyond the materialistic, right? And people fall on all ends of that spectrum. Some people are completely on the materialistic end of the spectrum. They are only interested in materialistic measurements of success and materialistic possessions. And that's how they gauge their happiness and everything. That's how they gauge the progress of society, whatever. There are some people, I don't know, probably Jimi Hendrix was on this end of the spectrum, that are purely looking for the metaphysical, spiritual, artistic fulfillment. Society and industry depends on both of those kind of people. If you're living in a society completely dominated by people that are only interested in the materialistic stuff, you end up making the Matrix, which I can only speak as being a resident of the United States. We're like one step away from that. I think China's probably right in lockstep with us trying to build the Matrix and enslave humanity to AI and machines, right? If that end of the spectrum completely ruled the world unchecked and ruled industry unchecked, you end up having no human artwork. Your artwork's created by AI. Everyone's living in the metaverse with VR goggles. All music is written by an algorithm. Everything's running real efficiently. We got these Teslas and we got drones that can fly around and identify your face and blow you up if you've, offended the social norms or whatever. So yeah, that end of the spectrum, you build the Matrix and you build that kind of technological, inhuman, soulless hell, right? But on the other end of the spectrum, if hippy dippy, spiritualistic, artistic people were left to rule the world unchecked, it would create a different kind of hell that more closely resembles the Manson family or like the terminal stages of the dying hippie movement. We're all, wow, yeah, there's art, there's great music and love and kumbaya, but eventually you look around and you're like, oh shit, we're out of food because nobody was farming or doing agriculture or livestock. We're out of everything because nobody was manufacturing anything. I broke a guitar string and there's no guitar strings because I was too busy tapping into the spiritual plane of existence. And then you create a hell where you're wallowing around in a bunch of nasty hippie shit and everything sucks on that end of the spectrum. So any industry and any society, you have to find a balance of those two things. The music industry and any industry that depends on commodifying that spiritual, artistic end of the spectrum, you're going to run into problems because the people on the materialistic end of the spectrum it's inevitable that they will take advantage of the people that are creating the art. It's just a type of person. You know, that's just a natural result of those two type of people working together and interacting. Another aspect of the music industry that sort of doomed it to being a predatory, whatever Hunter S. Thompson called it, money pit, trench, or whatever. The whole thing was started by people that had the money and want to keep the money and make more money, taking advantage of people who had a gift of tapping into this universal power of music or art or whatever it was. The guys that have the money are going to fuck over the guys that don't have the money but have the gift. Again, it's inevitable. So this whole thing was predicated on that. And the music industry, since its inception, to me, sort of more closely resembles indentured servitude than it does actual full-blown capitalism. And I'm speaking of the traditional music industry model, traditional model of record deals and the percentages of royalties and stuff like that you're getting in a deal like that. Now, there are labels today, plenty of them, that do not operate under that model. $20 spin, closed casket activities, profound lore. Pretty sure Hell's Headbangers is what I would call the new model. And all I can tell you from working with a label like $20 spin is the split on the profits is a lot better. It's a lot better. That's the new model, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the old model because I've been in both over the course of Spirit Adrift. I'm going to back up a little bit. There was a time in my life where I looked at it this way. Making money is to never mingle with making music, ever. I do this to make money. I put none of my heart and soul into it, period. I do this to make music. I put all of my heart and soul into it. And that's a necessity when you're starting out because you got to pay the bills. And it takes a long time, almost for everybody, to get your art to start paying the bills. And at some point, there's a really difficult, scary decision that you have to make where you say, okay, let's forget about this whole thing of going and clocking in at this place where I don't want to be, where I'm investing none of myself just to make money to support this music thing so that I can express my soul in the way that I need to and fulfill what I believe to be my life's purpose, right? At some point, you say fuck it to all that other stuff and you dive headfirst into the music thing. You have to. There has to be somebody in your band that's able to figure that out, willing to do it. It's scary, right? This happened for me, I would say 2017. I had entered into what you would call like an old school traditional record industry deal. which are garbage. It's indentured servitude. But if you're starting out and you're trying to really take off with your band and maybe make a career out of it, it is something that you can use to get that going still. Even though that model is a little bit outdated and you wonder why the fuck people still do it, there are benefits to it. And one way that it helps you is you're trading a little bit of independence for the raising of your profile, right? That's a big thing. I talked to Matt Harvey from Exhumed about that a lot before signing to Century Media. He said, dude, try it out. Take it as high as you can. Poke your head out of the water. Jump out of the water like a fucking dolphin as high as you can and get as many people to see you as you can. And if it works out, you just keep going. And if it doesn't, at least you got more people are aware of you now, right? Which that really stuck with me. That's a great like visual metaphor. So you're trading independence for a higher profile. You're trading independence for, in certain cases, really good distribution, getting your music in stores, on streaming, on playlists, stuff like that. And you can do that on your own, but it is a pain in the ass. And you're trading some independence for making contact with the Illuminati, basically. I don't really believe in the Illuminati, kind of, but there is a cabal of people who have worked at labels or worked as managers or agents or promoters or festival organizers or people that handle merch. And cabal has a negative connotation and kind of an evil, spooky thing. It's not really that. It's just people who have worked in the industry for a long time and put their time in. You learn who to trust, who not to trust, who you work well with. And these are the people calling the shots. And a really good way to make contact with that world is to enter into a traditional old school label deal with one of these bigger labels. There's really only 3 big labels now. Sony owns a couple popular metal labels at this point. So at some point when I was coming up, I sort of changed my thinking about, okay, the making money thing and the making art thing can never intersect. Otherwise, it's going to poison the making art thing, and it's not going to be pure, and it's not going to be a real raw expression of my soul. That's all bullshit. That's all, at least in my opinion, I look at that way of thinking now as being purely childish and sort of self-defeating. Because what's worse for creativity than having to dedicate 8 hours of your life every day to go somewhere that's killing you inside? For me, it's a lot easier to write a good song when all I'm doing all day, every day has something to do with music. Again, like I mentioned before, if you're starting, or maybe I didn't mention it before, but I'll say it. This whole shit with Spotify, it's whatever. You're never going to make a living off of Spotify. Unless you're Madonna or somebody, she probably barely pays her bills with anything having to do with streaming or Spotify or anything like that. DJ Paul, in an interview, I watched a lot of 3 6 Mafia interviews because they are dialed in to that materialistic business side of things. And DJ Paul said in an interview that his dad, when he was growing up, told him you need 7 sources of income at all times. And that stuck with me. That stuck with me. So you can, in the music industry, you can have merch, right? Online merch could be one. Merch that you sell on tour could be another. I wouldn't even count royalties, but let's put streaming, performance royalties is one, right? Mechanical royalties is another. Publishing, if you own your publishing, right? Hopefully I can monetize this podcast someday. That'll be another. But you want to stack up as much of that as you can. And some of them on their own might not seem like much, but if you can stack those up, you can start to pay the bills. And again, it's a really difficult position to get to. It takes a lot of work and a lot of luck, I'll be frank, but you can get there. And when I signed a traditional label type deal in 2016 with the first label I worked with. This is what was backing that decision. I wanted to make contact, I wanted to, the Spirit Adrift experiment, although it didn't start this way, I think it's become, let me see how far I can take this. I want to see what it's like at the top of the music industry, right? You start to approach the top and you start to have second thoughts about it. But I went from, let me make an aside here too. Part of the reason that these bigger labels can get people to sign terrible deals, and part of the reason people put their music on Spotify and make no money off of it, is because the people on the far spiritual, artistic side of the spectrum that I mentioned earlier, you have dreams. They can't be quantified, can't be measured, right? And the people on the other end of the spectrum know that they can leverage your dreams against you to get you to do basically whatever they want. My journey, I've been very, very fortunate. I've learned a lot through this, and the first deal I signed was like a traditional old school major label deal. Dog shit, complete fucking dog shit, indentured servitude, straight up. And the guy that I signed the deal with, he's a joke. He's a sad person. He's almost, I think he's trying to embody the sort of caricature, evil, dirty music business guy. But he's like too much of an ineffective little dick wimp to even like pull it off. It's really sad. But anyway, I got out of that deal. You can get out of any, don't worry too much about like signing record deals and stuff like that, because you can get out of them just by being a fucking menace, believe me. And I've helped some people with that. So I got out of that deal. I always wanted to work with 20 Buck Spin. Started working with Dave at 20 Buck Spin. He works off of the new model, which is fucking awesome. Everybody makes money. That's the model. Everybody makes money. Everybody's happy. Everybody succeeds. I was in a great position before I got back into the traditional big label deal, because again, I want to see how far I can take this thing. Working with Dave, zero complaints. None. Dave is 20 Buck Spin. Amazing situation. Amazing, right? So that put me in a position when we started looking at bigger labels for more distribution and bigger tours and that sort of thing. I didn't need anything from anybody, right? I'm in a position where I have absolutely nothing to lose. But here's the thing about the modern music industry. None of us need anything from anybody. We can make our own music at home. We don't need a recording advance. You can make a good sounding record for nothing. You can put it on Bandcamp. You can keep all that money, and then you can license it to whatever label you want to print it on vinyl. You don't need them for shit. Or if you don't put it out on vinyl, you can put it on Bandcamp and on streaming and just do it that way and build it that way. So I want everybody to realize you don't need a label to do anything. A lot more bands are doing it that way now too. My next project, I'm doing it complete independent way. You'll see I already got the whole thing mapped out. But before I signed with Century Media, I was in a very advantageous position where I didn't care if I signed with a bigger label or not. I was perfectly happy to stay with Dave. I'll be just as happy today if I was still working with Dave. So I was able to really leverage that. And I basically got a deal that I was happy with. I just kept saying no until I was satisfied with what I was being presented, and started working with Century Media. And anybody can do that. Anybody can do that. You don't need a label in this day and age. Fortunately, I love Century Media. I really respect everybody there. I feel like everybody there has aspects of both end of this spectrum that I'm talking about. And I think that results in some pretty cool stuff. The label has like really, I was looking at the roster the other day. It's fucking cool. There's a lot of good bands on Century Media. And I feel proud to say I think that Spirit Adrift was sort of at the forefront. I would say Blood Incantation and Spirit Adrift were sort of at the forefront of cool, real, legit, newer bands starting to work with Century Media. Super stoked on my interactions with that label. I'm going to go back to the spectrum thing, right? Because I talked about when I was younger, I would completely separate making money to pay the bills and making art, right? And I've since figured out that if you can combine those things, it's actually more beneficial to creativity and songwriting and stuff like that. You can also look at this spectrum that way, right? Some of the most beastly people in their fields and in their industries, whether it's a capitalistic industry or an artistic industry, are people that can figure out how to turn on and off both extreme ends of that spectrum. A good example would be Steve Jobs. Not a fan of the dude, really, but obviously he had the capitalistic thing, and he came up with the iPhone while he was on acid, pulled it out of thin air, right? Pretty successful guy. The thing that I am most excited to have developed over the course of this journey that I've been on, trying to see how high I can climb the music industry ladder while still making real art and good music. The thing I'm most psyched to have figured out is that I can put on different hats depending on what I'm doing. If I'm dealing with something on the business end, I can take off my spiritualistic, artistic hat, set it on the counter, put on my predatory capitalist hat, and go to war. I haven't needed to go to war in a long time, but just stand your ground and do things the way you want to do things on the business end of things. I have great people helping me with that too. I'm fortunate. I have really, really lucked out with the people on the business end of things. When that's all done, you want to make sure and completely remove that hat and fucking burn it and do whatever you got to do to put yourself into that plane of existence that cannot be measured monetarily or scientifically. I call it the spiritual plane. Again, I don't give a shit if you're an atheist. Even if you don't believe in it, when you're writing a song or creating art, you are tapping into something that's greater than you, that cannot be perceived by your five senses until you transform it into something that can be perceived by your five senses. I really believe in that. Let's see. I told you, man, I'm a fucking tangential existential tirade here, dude. So yeah, I don't know. That's how I look at the music industry. You can only get fucked over by somebody if you let them. So as much as we as artists want to be allergic to anything business related, do yourself a favor and become just as much of a killer on the business end of things as you are on the riff end of things. You know, I feel like I've gotten to the point where, and it takes time, man. It takes a lot of time and a lot of experience. But I got the guitar playing down, right? I got the singing down at some point. Can always get better. Always get better. I'm pretty satisfied with my songwriting, pretty satisfied with my arranging. I'm getting to be more satisfied with my skills as far as production and engineering goes. So what else is there? I want to master this shit. I love this music game. I love it. It's my purpose on earth. The most miserable I've ever been is the couple of times in my life that I wasn't pursuing this music game with my whole being. So what's left after the artistic side? I want to figure out a way where I don't have to think about or do anything else other than write badass songs that I love and go play them. That's going to take some exploring of that materialistic end of the spectrum. And I actually really enjoy that aspect of it now. There's two books I'm going to mention. The War of Art. This is definitely a more general, philosophical, existential approach to dedicating your life to whatever your dream is. It's a life changer. Check it out. The one I'm knee deep in right now is All You Need to Know About the Music Business by Donald S. Passman. The very beginning of it's like, this is the 10th edition and the music industry has changed more since the last edition than it has since the dawn of the music industry. But you know, it's not a totally hopeless thing. It's not. The music industry's changed a lot. It's easy to be like, oh, it used to be so much better. You know, in the 70s, you had to really kick ass to even get into a position where you could make a record that people are going to hear and blah, blah, blah. And that's true. I think there was more of a filter back then. And there's probably too many bands now, and a whole lot of them suck. But on the other end, it's like, I looked at some of the figures in this book, and more people are spending, or people on average are spending more money nowadays with subscription services and stuff like that than what they were spending on average in a year back in 99, which was the peak of the physical sales of the music industry. And he talked about the main issue that's happening right now is we had an industry that was based on selling physical goods that is no longer really based on selling physical goods. So of course there's going to be some growing pains. I feel like the music industry is in like a spasm, and it has been for a while. Things look bad. Things look bad in society too. But I have hope that stuff like that happens right before a major transformation. Those growing pains and the spasm of a dying model that no longer serves us. All of that is indicative of a major transformation, which I think is going to be positive. Holy shit. I feel exhausted, man. I don't know if any of that made any fucking sense. Oh my God. Okay. I'm going to go to another fan question here. Seb from France. I remember you, bro. We talked outside of the show in Paris. What makes harmony in a band between members, and how does that impact the creation process? I'm kind of in a unique position as the second part of that question because Spirit Adrift is kind of a solo project. There has been contributions by everyone involved, but I pretty much write the songs and then we go from there. As far as harmony in a band between the members, it's complex. It's complex. That's why so many bands change members like you change socks, you know? And it's such an anomaly when you have a band like ZZ Top that's stuck around same guys for so long. You have to really be committed to this. And this sounds really sad and shitty, but the vast majority of people that I've played in bands with thought that they wanted to be a rocker, that like that was their life's goal and their life's purpose, and that turned out to not be true, whether they know it or not. So first of all, you have to find somebody that's willing to have a really atypical life. You know, this is not a typical way of living. You got to really be dedicated. You got to be willing to sacrifice a lot. You got to be willing to have a family situation and a relationship situation where maybe your partners and your loved ones are not going to feel like they're getting all of you all of the time. And sometimes they're getting none of you. You know, if you're in a touring band, sometimes they're getting literally none of you. And it's hard to find people like that. Especially with the working class section of the music industry just disappearing more and more and more every day, it seems. It is, I would say more than ever, it's a grind and a commitment just to fucking scrape by making music. And it takes a person that's really, really in love with music to want to do that. You also have to find people who don't completely drive you crazy every second that you're around them, because on tour, you're going to be right up next to these guys or gals for long stretches of time, right? So I don't know. I mean, that's a super complicated question. You might as well ask, like, what creates harmony in a marriage, siblinghood, friendship, business partnership, traveling circus counterparts? Like, it's very complicated. I love my bandmates that I've got now, man. I really do. I've never been happier with the state of things. You know, it might sound all like doom and gloom with this music industry talk, but honest to God, like, my life, the band, everything is in the best shape it's been ever, maybe. Shit's clicking finally. The COVID thing really threw a wrench in the works, but we're all kind of slowly getting back to being able to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I was going to mention something else on that topic. Anyway, other question. What are the places you like to tour the most, or dreamed venues you did not play yet? Well, I love touring in the South. I just love the South in general. People are fucking nuts. People go real hard for rock music, maybe because there's not as much going on or something, like smaller college towns. I like touring Germany. Germany's super metal, and we're super metal. We're not trying to be like, yeah, we're a metal band, but we dress like this. Check out this gimmick. Or I don't know, metal's like kind of a faux pas right now, so we're more influenced by 90s industrial Matrix B-side soundtrack remixes. Like, no, we're a fucking metal band. Metal's sick. Metal's badass. Germany gets that. I love playing in the Netherlands. France was great, man. I love playing anywhere that people are into our music and not just like on their phones like, I'm at a show. Look, nobody gives a shit, but I'm at a show. Please care about me. No. I love playing places where people are freaking out, singing along. So anywhere where that is, which is kind of starting to be a lot of places we go, which is badass. Dream venues we did not play yet. I mean, I watched all those like Castle Donington festival videos from the 80s and stuff, 90s. And, you know, that turned into Download. So looking forward to that. I mean, that's a pretty legendary thing. Other venues, I'm not sure, man. We've played a lot of places at this point. Looking forward to playing Hellfest. Seb said, can't wait to see it at Hellfest. Hopefully we'll get the opportunity to keep discussing there. I'm sure we will. I'll wear my Spirit Adrift long sleeves, on which I hope there were not merch cuts. I don't think there were merch cuts on that tour ever. It seems to be a US and UK thing. I don't know. Could be wrong. But yeah, good to hear from you, Seb. I remember you, dude. Your buddy, whatever his name was fucking going ham over PLF. You guys just seen PLF? Your friend was really funny, man. I remember you guys. Good looking out. My boy Eli, who's been a longtime supporter. Who are your favorite rhythm guitar players? Why is it Malcolm Young? What do they do better than all others? Favorite riff from each. That's funny. Dave Mustaine famously said that he thought the three best rhythm guitar players in metal were Dave Mustaine, Malcolm Young, and James Hetfield. I would agree with that. It's crazy that two of the best rhythm guitar players in a genre of music would be in the same band at some point, but kind of hard to argue. Dimebag's a really good rhythm player. He's my favorite metal guitar player, period. Obviously a phenomenal lead player too, but his rhythms are special. He's doing a lot of upstrokes. You ask what do they do better than all others? Dimebag did upstrokes. That Cowboys from Hell, that's all upstrokes. It's like a ZZ Top thing. Billy Gibbons would be another favorite rhythm guitar player. You wouldn't think of him as a rhythm player if you're primarily a fan of metal, because he doesn't do a lot of like chugs and stuff like that. But the actual rhythm, literally just the rhythm of the riffs and licks that he's playing, the rhythm of his solos, some of the stuff he's doing is like he's using a part of his brain that I cannot access on my own. I love studying his leads and stuff. So yeah, I would say Malcolm Young for sure, James Hetfield, Dave Mustaine, Dimebag, Billy Gibbons, Jeff Waters from Annihilator, great rhythm players, super, super, super tight. Favorite riffs from these guys? My favorite riff from Malcolm is probably Rock and Roll Damnation. The thing about AC/DC is Malcolm's playing and Angus's playing creates like a one giant amazing guitar chord, right? They split the chords up or do different voicings of the chords, but they're hitting it together, and it's very special. So Malcolm is a great rhythm player, but Angus is definitely a part of what makes him a great rhythm player. Mustaine, I don't know, probably any riff in Holy Wars. Mustaine does like acrobatic stuff. That's what he does better than anybody. All the spider chords and super precise alternate picking and really fast left hand. Hetfield, we all know he's the right hand, you know. Favorite Hetfield riff? I'm not sure what's a Hetfield riff or a Hammett riff or a Mustaine riff some of the time. But I would imagine that Hetfield wrote the riffs in Harvester of Sorrow, a lot of them. I don't have the credits in front of me, but I'm going to say Harvester of Sorrow in general. Favorite Dimebag riff? Maybe, as far as rhythm, probably 13 Steps to Nowhere. That was his right hand warm up. That's a, but as far as just like a riff in general, Regular People is a standout. Jeff Waters, I can't even think. There's some crazy Annihilator riffs. Okay, so record today, I'm going to talk about Rezn. What's the name of it? Solace, I think. Yeah, Solace by a band from Chicago called Rezn. What's cool about this is somebody on a YouTube comment on this podcast asked me if I had heard the new Rezn album. And I had not. And I come to find out they played Ripple Fest, Texas last year, and so did we. And I somehow, that's how fucking hard it can be sometimes as an aging man or aging rocker to discover a new band. I love this record. Thank you to whoever shouted this out. And, you know, going back to the topic of not needing labels and trading independence for those other things, these guys self-released this, and here's a vinyl. Y'all should be proud, man. I've done that in the past. I did that with one record, an old band I was in, and I don't even remember doing it. I was so lit up and partying so hard, I don't even remember what that process was like, but I know it's not easy. So hell yeah to Rezn for pressing their own record. This thing is amazing, man. It's, at first it reminded me a little bit of like Oceanic era Isis, which is some of my favorite stuff. It's heavy, but it's got a lot of atmosphere and a lot of cool effects and use of synthesizers and instruments that you wouldn't typically think of when you think of down-tuned, like really heavy post-metal and stuff like that. I was really vibing on the music, and that happens a lot. I'll hear something new and I'm vibing on the music, and then the vocals come in and I'm just like, God damn, and it's just ruined. So as the first song was playing on this Rezn album, I was thinking, Jesus, I hope the vocals are good. Please don't come in and ruin this. The guy's got an insane voice. It's so cool. It's really, man, just epic, and it's like high pitched, but not at all abrasive or annoying. Super melodic, beautiful. I'll call this, the vocals on this are beautiful, straight up. gave me a lot of feelings. Just very atmospheric, super heavy, super melodic, uplifting, crushing, a lot of mystical vibes and sounds. So I highly recommend it, man. I bought this as soon as I heard it. Rezn from Chicago, Rezn. The album is called Solace. There are only 2 records on my year-end list at this point in the year, and we're a quarter of the way through the year almost, and this is one of them. Do yourself a favor and check out Solace by the band Rezn. Again, doing it themselves. Get it on their Bandcamp. And it's good, man. So thanks to whoever recommended that. God damn it. I'm sure that there was something that I wanted to talk about that was lost in the midst of that manic vomit of chaos regarding the music industry. But I'm glad to have gotten some of that out of my head. I love what I do, man. I just remembered the other thing I wanted to talk about. For anybody that's pouring their entire being and heart and soul into a dream, whether it's a creative endeavor like making songs, playing in a band, making art, making trinkets, selling them on Etsy, put your whole self into it, but make a life for yourself outside of that you're truly happy with. That's been like, I'm not worried if Spotify is butt fucking me on royalties because I don't need them. I don't need them, man. At some point, I realized, this music thing may not work out. And I really started investing more time in my personal life, creating a life for myself that I'm totally fulfilled in. So that if someday there aren't touring bands and that's not even a thing, that I could still be happy just existing, right? Not only are you going to be happier that way, it also puts you in a more advantageous strategic position, because then if somebody comes dangling a carrot, I'll use a random example. Say one of your favorite bands wants to take you to Europe and they offer you 1/5 of what you're worth. That's what I'm talking about. People leveraging people's dreams against them in this business, that sort of thing. If you have a life that you love and you're not dependent on touring with this band that you love to fulfill yourself, you can tell them no. And you don't lose a second of sleep over it. So yeah, man, that's my take on the music industry and my experiences in the music industry. There's nothing else I would rather be doing. There is a way to make a living off of just writing songs and playing them. There is. It's really fucking hard. But hey, it's really fucking hard in any job right now in any industry. So fuck it, man. I wouldn't rather be doing anything else. All right. Thanks, guys. That's it. And I'll see you next episode.